Greetings, innovators and leaders. This is AI for the C-Suite, your compass for navigating the exponential age. I'm your host, Chad Harvey, and we're here to bring you cutting-edge insights on AI tailored specifically for middle market organizations. Buckle up as we embark on a journey through the transformative world of artificial intelligence. Today, I am delighted to welcome Ben Johnson, CEO and founder of Freya Systems. Ben brings a unique perspective to our conversation as both a technology innovator and strategic thinker in the AI space. Originally from the UK, Ben came to America in '04 while working with BAE Systems before founding Freya Systems in 2009. His company specializes in helping businesses transform data into actionable insights through predictive analytics and custom software solutions. With over a decade of experience implementing AI and machine learning solutions for industries including aviation, defense, utilities, and manufacturing, Ben has led projects for organizations like Boeing, focusing on predictive maintenance and anomaly detection systems. What I particularly appreciate about Ben's approach is his focus on holistic AI implementation rather than just surface-level applications. He's on a mission to help executives think strategically about AI beyond the latest chatbot or trending tool. Ben regularly shares his expertise as a speaker on AI strategy for Vistage, helping business leaders understand the full spectrum of AI applications and to develop implementation strategies that align with their broader business goals. Ben also considers Alan Turing a personal hero, and he combines technical expertise with a passion for lifelong learning and knowledge sharing. Today, we'll explore how middle-market companies can leverage AI as a strategic advantage in this rapidly evolving landscape. Ben, welcome to AI for the C-Suite.
Thank you for having me, Chad. It's a pleasure to be here.
We are really excited, and I'm going to jump right in. During our prep call, you said a number of things that really resonated with me, and one of the things that really struck me was your statement that implementing ChatGPT isn't equivalent to a complete AI strategy. It's, I think in your words, like installing Microsoft Office in the 90s and saying digital transformation is complete, which we all know it is not. So, if we're going to talk effective strategy, what key components should a comprehensive AI strategy include for middle market companies other than just flipping the switch on ChatGPT and saying, off you go?
Okay, and that's a great question, Chad. I think my belief is middle market companies should really, and in fact, all companies should focus very much first on what are their discriminators, what sets them apart from their competition, what's their competitive advantage, their niche. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the start point for everything they should build their strategy around. So before we go to the technology toolbox, I encourage companies to focus very much on where am I going to apply artificial intelligence technologies. I mean, clearly, ChatGPT could be part of the equation. I can roll that out to my marketing team, get them to use that to build content or to help write emails and things like that. But if that's not my sweet spot, if that's not where I'm really my business focus is, I personally don't believe you're going to get the most value out of that. So I encourage businesses to start with that. What's your discriminator? And then match that up with their current sort of strategic objectives. Because the other thing that I like to tell people is that AI is not a silver bullet. I think most business leaders are always looking for that one thing that's going to make the huge difference. And I do believe it will make a very big difference, but it's part of a much bigger equation.
Absolutely. I love the way that you focus in and call it a discriminator. I think that that's a little edgier term than what a number of other folks use, but I get the point, and I think it's well taken. So in the quest for honing in on your discriminator and figuring out what makes the most sense, how should execs balance, let's say, experimentation with some of the different AI tools versus focusing on more foundational pieces like data infrastructure? Because there's a lot of shiny objects that continue to come down the pike, and I think maintaining that strategic focus is very challenging sometimes.
Oh, I wholeheartedly agree, especially when it's such a rapidly moving market. I mean, if we look at the new technologies that are coming along at a pace every single day, even being a kind of really focusing on this particular industry and what's happening, I'm finding it difficult sort of keeping up. So for businesses where it's not their bread and butter, I can imagine that can be really challenging. And I think I would when it comes to balancing that the use of the technology with experimentation, uh, I certainly would. I don't know. I like that kind of usual 80-20 mix. It's a bit of a trite sort of kind of message there, but I think always having something which is more experimental is very good. We tend to refer to those more in the moonshot sort of category because usually that can take us into more complex implementations, which can have some more substantial rewards. And that's also where technologists like me get very excited and very down a rabbit hole, which is not necessarily going to deliver the value that I think we're looking for from a business perspective. And one of the things I've seen a lot from some of the top AI influencers just recently is, yes, that AI experimentation, that experimentation with different technologies is always valuable. However, they're suggesting once you've started to identify one or two technologies, say, I want a chat bot that's going to help me kind of write and author content. Maybe I pick two. Like, for example, myself, I tend to gravitate towards either ChatGPT or Claude, and then I use a mix of the two. Do you know what I mean? And I think that makes a lot of sense because becoming comfortable with each of these technologies is just as important as kind of implementing them, and maybe more so than the experimentation, because we can, as I think you're alluding to there, we can really get bogged down with, oh, this is something new, and then all you're doing is kind of scratching the surface rather than really identifying how you can integrate it with a business and where you're going to get the most value.
Mm-hmm. I want to jog sideways for a second because you mentioned going down some rabbit holes, and I'd love to know what's been the most interesting or fascinating rabbit hole that you found yourself down in the last 6 months, whether it's in AI land or on maybe another project.
That's a great question, and I think for me, and actually, it's actually not becoming much of a rabbit hole anymore. But I've been going down this rabbit hole of where agentic AI is going to go and how agentic AI is going to impact the workplace and business. I would also say that I'm very cautious about that because of the implications of AI taking actions and that being one of the few areas where it can. Especially if we are asking it to write code, and then the next step from that is obviously write and execute code, and that has I think some broader implications. So I would definitely say I've kind of got funneled down that rabbit hole to understand it some more. And I think that 2025 is clearly the year of agentic AI, and that's going to become less a rabbit hole and more a part of the mix. And although we haven't kind of implemented any projects in that area yet, I can see between now and the end of the year that us starting to help others in implementing projects in that space.
Mm-hmm. I'm really glad that you mentioned agentic AI, and maybe this is a time to dig into that a little bit. One of the things, and you surfaced something here that I think was very, very important. So I want to drill in on that with a specific question. You talked about, and you didn't use this term, but you basically talked about autonomy, right? Autonomy of these agentic systems, whether it's semi-autonomous, fully autonomous, think of it like an intern that comes back, has to ask for permission sometimes. But we're talking about some level of autonomy with agentic systems. And we're recording this episode in spring, in April of 2025. And there's been some recent research that Anthropic, you mentioned liking the tool Claude. So Anthropic is the company behind Claude. Anthropic just published some research where they're digging in and examining how these systems think. And I'm using air quotes here for our audio listeners. And what they found is that it's not quite the linear process that we would expect. And I think that was some really interesting insight, which begs a lot of questions about agentic AI. Because what these systems end up doing sometimes, at least according to the Anthropic research, is they're going to arrive at their conclusion, then they're going to justify their conclusion. And it's not necessarily the sequential linear path that we're hoping for. So that was a lot of table setting, Ben. With all that said, and given the rush and the push for agentic AI, what do you think that research means in terms of our ability to structure agentic AI that is going to faithfully and reliably execute processes and work alongside its human counterparts in an effective manner. And I know I'm asking you a very big, broad, crystal ballish question here, but we're all on the bleeding edge of a frontier here, and it's not like anybody's really got the answers, even the people that are building this stuff. So you're as good as anyone to answer that question.
Well, I appreciate that, Chad. Sometimes I think I'm a novice at this, even though I'm kind of immersed in it on a kind of daily basis. I think. Oh, well, for one, I like the fact that you keep referring to it as an assistant, and as you also kind of mentioned it as an intern, and that's one of the things that I keep schooling people. I mean, we've got to remember at its core that this is a probabilistic engine, and so sometimes it's going to be wrong, and it's going to make things up. And I always encourage people to bring that healthy degree of skepticism to the answers and the responses that it brings, and with that healthy degree of skepticism comes education. If you understand how it works, then you are much better armed to get the most out of it. And I think I haven't yet had the chance to dig into Anthropic's research. It is one of the things that I've got bookmarked. Funnily enough, I saw that pop up just the other day, and I'm like, oh, I want to dig into that. And I just haven't had the chance yet.
Well, there's just so much. It's impossible to keep up.
Yeah. But based off of what you say, that kind of makes sense. And I can see that that's going to have broader implications, not only as it's being used today, but what does that mean as it continues to evolve? I mean, clearly the models are getting much more efficient in many kind of ways. They're getting much more capable. We're starting to reduce that hallucination rate down, even though it's still, in my humble opinion, scarily high for quite a lot of uses. Hence the making sure we treat it like an assistant. And so I'm curious as to see where that goes into the next levels. I mean, one of the things that discriminates us humans with AI, after all, is that ability to make cognitive leaps. And if it's in effect going through that justification cycle, we're getting to the point where the models are in effect starting to model rumination, which is where those cognitive leaps tend to come into play. And I'm fascinated where that will go next. I think this is why we need to be balancing where we're using it, and how we're using it, and how we advance it. And I understand completely why there's a big push for us to make sure that we continue to pull back regulation and push very hard, because other countries like the Chinese and the Russians aren't going to be putting regulation in the way. And I think that we can be much more informed, and that's why I like companies like Anthropic bringing that kind of transparency to what we are creating and how we are creating it, and that thought process to go into it to give us those checks and balances of is this the right way of doing this, and should we continue to make sure that we understand much more what thinking is going on, especially when we get to that autonomy that you mentioned, because at that point, I mean, we have that old story of a paperclip manufacturing AI, but it's true. Well, if we can't, us humans aren't always the best at articulating our goals in the first place, and if we can't articulate goals well to AI, and it's starting to ruminate and think and take action, I think that's where we need to have pause. And where I think us as business owners, because I know that's why I love the Vistage community, because it's that group of peer-to-peer business owners. I think we can have an influence to say, okay, what are the implications of what we are using, and how we bring that to our workforce? Because our employees are still going to have that creativity, that cognitive ability to make those leaps and those jumps, and bringing those together to work hand in hand is going to be a huge challenge. And I think we have the responsibility and the opportunity to lead that discussion.
That's well said, Ben. And you touched on the issue of communication. And I think as someone who's worked in strategy as an executive coach for over a decade, that is one of the most trying pieces of any organization, is getting two or more humans to communicate with each other in an effective manner. And now we're going to layer on AI, which in some cases is very literal and then in others is very interpretive. And I'm fascinated with where this is all going to go. I think that this, we could easily spend the next 45 minutes having kind of a philosophical conversation here about the nature of this subject. But I just wanted to highlight that because the way that we communicate with these systems, I think, is going to continue to need to evolve in a very, very rapid way. And we're going to have to be much more deliberate about our communications with them, whether it's voice or audio or video or just simply text chat, because quite frankly, humans are not good communicators at the end of the day. We're just not. We like to think we're excellent, but we suck. That's really what it comes down to, quite frankly. So
yeah, I'd agree with you. If I could add on one element there, I think
sure.
One of the things I've identified is I think prompt engineering 6 to 12 months ago, it was like, oh, everyone's going to need to be a prompt engineer. And I think it's fairly clear that prompt engineering is going to go away. However, I believe that kind of training, that education in outlining something of, oh, here's the task that I want you to do. Here are the requirements. Do you know what I mean? In a very structured way can maybe help us combat exactly what you're talking about. Because you're right. We suck at communication.
Yeah.
I know I suck at communication at times and go, damn, I wish I'd said that. So maybe all of that work on prompt engineering will pay off in the long run.
Maybe it will. Geez, Ben, I got to ask, you didn't read the article that I published last week, did you?
I
didn't think
I haven't had the chance yet.
Well, that's exactly what it was about. It was about the fact that prompt engineering is done, right? Mm-hmm. It's an old, it kind of struck me. So, well, that gives me some reinforcement that maybe I'm on the right track with the way I'm thinking about things. So thank you for that. Okay. So it was just a little shot out of the blue there that kind of surprised me. So, all right. Let's bring this back down to something more tangible here. You've worked in a lot of different industries: aviation, defense, manufacturing, utilities. And I think that the focus of this podcast is always rigorously and stringently on the middle market, right? And so you've implemented a lot of predictive analytics in a variety of diverse industries. And I'm interested what patterns that you may have observed about AI applications that you've either built, bought, rent, or stole that might deliver the most immediate ROI for execs. So it doesn't matter which industry you focus on or if you want to kind of aggregate, but what are the patterns that you're seeing out there, and what are the applications that you're finding deliver the most value?
Ooh, that's a good question. So I can only speak from our experience, Chad, which does tend to be much more in the custom machine learning algorithms. So we do a lot of training of off-the-shelf machine learning algorithms, very much in that predictive and that anomaly detection space. We're certainly starting to experiment with the sort of RAG-based models, and I can see tons of application going forward, and I can see tons of interest. But from my previous experience, that's not something that we've done a lot of to date. So if we hone in on those kind of custom machine learning algorithms, I think there's still a great deal of value to be had in many respects. One of which is it's much easier and it's much quicker now to train. So certainly there is a pattern happening where training those specific algorithms to hit those specific purposes is getting faster and faster. It's easier to deploy them. They use a lot less computing resources. And so there is still plenty of value, I think, to be had in those very specific algorithms trained for very specific purposes, whether that's to identify failures in aircraft, so predicting when components are going to fail, or whether it's trying to optimize like a wastewater treatment plant. Both of those are kind of opposite end use cases that we've implemented, because they use the business's data. It doesn't go outside of the enterprise for sure. It's very constrained, very rapid to produce, and can have some very high levels of results with respect to the results it delivers to the business around those kind of key discriminating areas. And so I think there's still plenty to be had, like plenty of value to be had in that area. And I think one of the patterns that I'm actually starting to see is less and less focus on that area. And I think that that has the potential to leave quite a lot on the table. So I would encourage business, especially in those kind of those manufacturing spaces. I mean, that's we understand what I call kind of big devices. So whether that's an aircraft, whether it's a manufacturing line, because they have sensor data, and that's much more accurate. Doesn't, as you said, us earlier on, you referred to us humans being very poor communicators, and so when it comes to written kind of uh, maintenance records or things like that, it tends to get very kind of messy. Whereas those sensors, they don't tend to lie. They break, but they don't tend to lie. Do you know what I mean? And that richness of data and that quickness to market, even if that's a kind of internal market, so to speak, can be huge needle movers for businesses and actually have some. One of the other things that I think is a trend is I'm starting to see that bit of skepticism come into play, which I think is good. Of, well, what is the ROI? Like, what am I getting for the amount that I'm investing? And I mean, having been in the tech space for 20 years, I've seen some massive amounts of spending on some things that never returned any kind of reward at all. So I think those smaller algorithms still have that potential to deliver really solid ROI. It's easier to calculate that ROI and easier to get that value. And I also think that pattern can help businesses, because the other pattern I see is definitely that resistance. I've seen both ends of the spectrum. I mean, clearly 50% if we're on a bell curve, it's a fair assumption that 50% of the population or 50% of our employees are still scared of the technology and the fact that it's going to replace them. And so demonstrating those quick early wins, which can be more easily done with smaller, kind of more personalized, trained solutions, I think will help to demonstrate the value, gain the traction, get the ROI all at once. And so that's a good foundation for any kind of business. Certainly in the businesses I refer to, those kind of manufacturing, those harder businesses which have a lot of that rich sensor, non-human data to gain traction. Does that answer your question? I don't know if I kind of meandered a little.
No, you did, because one of my follow-ups was actually going to be whether you felt that there were certain industries in the middle market where companies would have maybe a particular advantage in AI implementation. But what I heard you say is that it's not necessarily an industry or specific advantage, but if you've got sensor-driven data as opposed to human-curated and collated data, that's going to provide the advantage.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it's very clear to me. I mean, quite often in my presentations, I use a quote from Peter Novig, who, like, let's face it, has got way more experience than most of the people I've ever met, and he talks about more data is better than less data, but good quality data is better than more data, and I think that's hugely true when it comes to implementing any form of artificial intelligence solution. And I try to guide people along the fact that 80% of it is good, high quality data. And so if you can tap into those richer sources of cleaner data straight away, you're not spending the time and effort having to clean it or curate it in particular ways. And that is where I think you can get that kind of quick and easy sweet spot value, because you've already got nicely structured, high quality data, which is going to feed high quality results.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. And I want to use this as a pivot point to talk a little bit about data, but I'll first mention, since you touched on it in your answer, I'm sure I'm now going to get hate mail from people telling me that humans are great communicators and I don't know what I'm talking about. So with that addressed and out of the way, I'm waiting for your emails now. Let's talk about data as the new oil, because I know that that's a concept that's near and dear to your heart. And I think it's actually in your LinkedIn profile, and we'll talk at the end about how people can get in touch with you. But I believe I read this in your LinkedIn profile where you outline some steps for how folks can get value from their data, and they start basically with defining the question, right? So here's my question for you. How can executives and owners, CEOs in middle market organizations realistically, because I think that's the key here, how can they realistically assess their organization's data readiness before they invest in AI? Because this is a subject that keeps coming up interview after interview, conversation after conversation. It's the maturity and the readiness of the data. And quite frankly, maybe I'll get hate mail on this too. What I'm hearing time and time again is that most organizations' data structure and hygiene sucks. So maybe that's the theme for today. This sucks, that sucks. But so let me return to the question. How can execs realistically assess their data readiness before they invest in AI initiatives?
Well, and that's a great question, Chad. And I hate to pile on. I might get some hate mail as well from this. My first step was, as you say, I think it comes down to like knowing what the right questions are to ask. But then it also comes down to having the right team. And unfortunately, I think we're defaulting very quickly to, oh, how can I implement something? It's all about, oh, I need to implement. And without that foundation of that data governance, that data hygiene that you refer to, I think we're on a road to implementing lots of solutions that don't deliver value. And this dates back pre the kind of AI boom from ChatGPT. If you look at some of the statistics from companies like Gartner, 85% of advanced analytics projects fail to meet their objectives. Now that's very impactful. I mean, there aren't many industries that can get away with a failure rate of that kind of magnitude. And most of those, I believe, kind of boil down to four factors. And one of those is poor quality data. And I think that's why I would encourage companies to start with data engineers over maybe data scientists. Do you know what I mean? Like, let's actually work harder at curating our data pipelines and making sure that we have good sources of data that are actually tailored to AI solutions as well. Because it's easy to just go, oh, I'm just going to throw it all in a non-relational database and the AI can figure it out. And yes, maybe it can, but that's not smart thinking. Do you know what I mean? In my humble opinion. So I think it's that combination, because as you also say, like asking the right question, like that's a good step in any strategy. What am I trying to achieve here? And I try to guide people along those same lines with respect to those discriminators, those things that make me different. If a business owner, if a mid-market business owner starts there and then says, well, what are the questions I want to ask about that? Those are going to be the high quality questions. And then the next step from that can be, okay, to answer that question, what data do I need? And then I can curate data around that. And then maybe I can start to experiment with some AI technologies. And quite often, they're not going to deliver the results I need. But that in turn can inform me of the additional data that I want to collect. So you can go through this kind of rapid cycle. And I also think that I encourage everyone to do that. We can do quick and dirty prototyping. It's so easy to do a fast prototype in any of these technologies today. So spending the time doing that and assessing the results and coming away with, well, is this going to be successful? Does this need to go? Do I just need to forget about this because it's not going to deliver? Is it something that actually is going to deliver so I can push that into production? Or is it something that I need to take a pause on because I don't have the data, or the data is clearly or not in the cleanest place, and come back and revisit it in a few months' time when my team of data engineers has spent more time curating, collecting, and manicuring all of that data to make sure that it helps you get the results you need. So I think those are the good steps that I would advise, and that kind of emphasizing data engineering as a specialty and as the value that it brings to artificial intelligence technology.
And I think that issue of the data engineers and the human component here opens the door to another question that often arises, which is, when I've got a middle market organization with limited resources, we can't just throw hundreds of millions of dollars at the problem like some large multinationals can, right? Call it a rounding error. So we've got limited resources. What is your recommendation for building AI capabilities? You talked about data engineers, but even beyond that, should we be looking as the leaders of organizations in the middle market to develop our own internal talent? Do we need to partner with specialists like Freya Systems? Do we need to take a hybrid approach? Where do we start? What's that look like? Because at the end of the day, it's still humans that are making the key decisions and parsing a lot of this information right now.
Yeah. Well, of course, Chad, I would tell everyone to partner with Freya Systems. That's the obvious answer. No, I actually believe that it's probably a hybrid approach. And
Sure.
the reason I said it's probably a hybrid approach is I also like to convey, I mean, I'm going to maybe bring this full circle back to ChatGPT and where we started this. ChatGPT is a large language model-based technology. It's based on natural language processing, machine learning. Like it's one of the tools in the AI toolbox that um, that but there's so much more. I mean, we can do quite a lot with computer vision solutions. We can do quite a lot with robotics. We can do quite a lot with just straightforward machine learning or deep learning algorithms focused around kind of prediction and that anomaly detection. Just like scratch the surface and name a few. And I think one of the other challenges is here, which is why those bigger corporations do have that advantage, is each one of those needs different specialty. Like data scientists can be adaptable and they can hop from one technology to the best, but this is, let's face it, this is two parts art and one part experience. I mean, and that experience counts a lot. And so having experience in that particular subset or kind of implementation is going to add a lot of value. So I think at the end of the day, it's a hybrid approach that is going to serve any business well. I certainly think that establishing a kind of generic capability internally with some data engineering that so at least I can maintain that and keep that going. And like there are plenty of companies like us out there who would be willing to help people kind of bootstrap that, get it started, and then kind of help them set things up internally. But then it's for every project, sit down, figure out what is the right team for that. Who do I need to bring in? Do I need to bring in external expertise for this one? What is the focus? I mean, one of the other challenges that we've quite often seen is there's aspirations for doing some of these projects, but the aspirations fall by the wayside because there's not enough focus. Do you know what I mean? So because a lot of their technology teams are already juggling 15 different things, and this is an exciting 16th one, but as a consequence, it's not getting the love it deserves, if I can use that kind of phrase. You know what I mean? So that's the other thing. Like, how much, what level of strategic value is it, and what's the right team for that? Do you know what I mean? And setting up each one of those teams, I think, adds the most value. And I would also articulate, and every time I share this with business leaders, they pull a face, and I completely understand why. A key member of that team is what I call subject matter experts. So those are the people that everyone knows in various teams within their organization. Everyone goes to them because they're the ones knocking it out of the park day in, day out. But they're also the people that have all of that intrinsic knowledge, and having them in partnership with any of those kind of those AI teams is going to maximize the levels of success. So I do think it's a hybrid approach, and I think it's kind of project dependent. And to get to that hybrid approach, you kind of need to educate your whole team so that they have that base level understanding of, oh, this project falls into that category, we're going to need this assistance, and we can go out and find it, or no, we can do this, we can handle this one internally. Does that make sense?
No, that makes a lot of sense. And as with everything that you've said, it begs another question here. And I don't want to color your response, but I get an awful lot of inquiries, and I do an awful lot of workshops for CEOs, owners of organizations, C-suite execs about AI. And I think a key question here, since you touched on SMEs, is what core AI literacy do I need as a leader? What should I be developing and investing in myself? Because let's be honest here. For most people in the Western world, and I guess the Eastern realm as well, this technology seemingly came out of nowhere. And you haven't had experience. It's all on the job training and learning. you don't have the context. I don't necessarily think a CEO or an owner needs to go back and learn how to code. I don't think that's going to serve you well. But what types of AI literacy should they be investing in for themselves to be able to help navigate this new era that we're in?
And I think that's a great and very astute question there, Chad, because I agree with you. I don't think, and what I try to share with the leaders that I talk to is they're much better served learning about the overarching technology than teaching themselves prompt engineering. Do you know what I mean? As we were talking about, prompt engineering is likely to be a flash in the pan. That said, it's always worthwhile experimenting and dabbling with these technologies because it's very easy to do so. And just that a couple of hours here and there would certainly break down some of those barriers. But I think overall, it's a more generalized understanding of what the technologies are in a broad spectrum, not just what's hot today, and uh, certainly kind of case studies like how have others used it and what ways. And that's definitely one of the trends that I see quite often whenever I present. No matter how many case studies I stuff into my presentation, every group wants more, and I get that because it's that's the thing that helps me as a leader kind of join the dots between here and here of, oh, if that business has done it that way, well, we're this business, so we could do it. Kind of in effect create our own Uber internally, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? We can craft it in our own particular way. And so I think that generalized experience is highly important, and that knowledge overall. And then I think the other thing is giving everyone in the business a base level of understanding, a base level of AI education, whether that's just picking some off-the-shelf Coursera courses, which are very good. They're free, they're easy to get access to, all the way through to some more kind of targeted, kind of specific education. I believe that's really important for several factors, one of which is I believe it removes the fear, which we talked about earlier. I also think that it sets those employees up better for the next generation of technology and what is going to happen. And I think if it's done well, it can energize them. And I see that, let's face it, and every time we've brought a new technology into the workplace, it tends to be the people doing the day-to-day work that come up with the new innovative sort of ideas. And so, yeah, it's a wholesale across the business, I think, education. I think I would advise like everyone gets that base level education. What's AI all about? And then it's very intentful. Okay, at a kind of C-suite business leader level, what are like staying kind of current on those overarching technologies and how others are implementing them. And then as you get closer and closer to the day-to-day kind of tactical employees who are doing the work, the training needs to shift into the specific technology and how it's impacting them, and how they can get the most out of it. And I think all of that also helps with the last factor, which I see a lot of, and I see a lot of questions around, which is security. And I think that education and that understanding serves employees much better to start to question, is this real or is this fake? And that's it really saddens me that I see that in different kind of areas. And actually, I've seen some really heartwarming opposites, but we've already seen businesses in Hong Kong where an employee had a conversation with who he thought with the CFO and four other C-suite leaders, and they were all deep fakes. Like he was the only real person on the call, which is scary. A CEO in my network just recently posted that some an external actor had been using his voice and some of his kind of videos to, in effect, bully one of his internal employees, which is this is the last thing we kind of need. But I think that education sets people up well for understanding and bringing that kind of semi-skeptical, where am I being duped here, and that helps in that kind of security construct.
You've surfaced an issue here. You kind of started with the term cybersecurity, and we're going to dedicate some upcoming episodes to that. We've got planning in process right now for some guests on that topic. But what you're really talking about here, too, beyond the cybersecurity elements, are the ability of these tools to leverage the vulnerabilities, the biases, and the patterns that the humans are already engaged in or have inherent in them. And it's not like some of these scams, and they're scams, right? Man-in-the-middle attacks or deep fakes or whatever. The technology changes, but the song remains the same, right? And so we are seeing a lot of that. And I'm afraid I've been guilty at times. I'll stand up in a workshop and somebody will ask me about this, and I'll say, look, you shouldn't trust anything ever again that you see or hear. And I don't know that I entirely believe that, but there's a large element of truth there. And I'm not quite sure how we navigate this because the technology is getting very good. And I think one of the things that came into focus for me with your explanation there was if there's a financial component involved, or if there is a critical decision component involved, I don't know that you should just automatically pull the trigger and trust what you're seeing and hearing, even if it sounds like the boss on the other end of the line. I think the conclusion I'm working myself here towards is be overly skeptical.
That's what I encourage people to do. Like it always drains me because I'm here trying to excite business because I fully believe that the world is going to be a different place in 5 years. Like this technology is radically, and it's not coming on its own. I mean, the book by Mustafa Suleiman, where he talks about it being in combination with biotechnology and quantum computing, is bang on the money. Like we've got the world is going to be very, very different, and we need to bring that skepticism because just like every technology before it, it's going to be used in bad ways and good. And I think as long as we do our best to continue to help others learn and understand that and communicate that to them, and to think about, am I using this for good? The better it's going to be as a whole world. And if I can leave you with one kind of thought around that and kind of idea in particular, I recently gave a presentation on the same day. I gave a presentation to our local police force where I was educating them in artificial intelligence, and I dug into all of those kind of darker elements, and that was good because that gave them a good education, but it was not very heartening to myself of like how the technology can be used for bad. And that same day, I actually went to another Vistage member. He invited me to present. He provides senior care, and he's like, "Oh, well, can you tell us what AI is being used for in the senior care space today, and where it could go in the future?" And I'm likely to get emotional, Chad, but I love this. Like this, if you extrapolate deep fakes to their absolute conclusion, I can see a world where we can have people in cognitive decline who can have conversations with their loved ones today who maybe aren't available, or their loved ones who have passed. And what a beautiful way to look after people and to use that same toxic technology for good. And I think that's something we need to hang on to, and it's ideas like that we need to keep casting out into the world and focusing on what we can do to make the world a much better place.
I think that's well said, and that's a beautiful example of how to use that particular offshoot of AI technology for a positive purpose. I was just reading a study the other day about the implications of AI in healthcare and how the U.S. healthcare system in particular is finally coming to grapple with the fact that we do not have enough nurses and doctors based on the pending demographic shortage and boom, or bust rather, that we've got coming. And so they're very rapidly beginning to explore what AI technology can do in the care space. And I think that your example there is a very narrow and targeted application of that, and it's absolutely wonderful. When the telephone came along, you had people convinced that it was the tool of the devil, and there's really no difference. I think our minds all go to dark places, but they also go to wonderful places as well, and that's the beauty of being on the frontier of something like this. Is there's dark, but there's also tremendous hope and possibility with what it can do. So, with that soliloquy in mind, I think we've got time for one more question here. And I think this is a natural segue from where we were a moment ago, talking about the positives and the negatives. Let's talk about ethics just for a moment. Beyond the technical challenges, what ethical considerations, or maybe risk factors is a better word, do you think that execs and leaders should be thinking about, or at least be aware of, when they're considering and implementing AI systems? Because again, understanding we're just at the dawn of this, yet the decisions that we're making now will have ripple effects and repercussions. So I'm not saying you've got to get it right, but what are some of the challenges and ethical considerations that you think should be weighed and evaluated, or at least known about, when we're talking about making decisions about AI in an organization?
Oh yeah, that's funnily enough. When I give a presentations, Chad, I touch on this at the end, and I say this is a whole topic unto itself. So I'll do my best to answer
60 seconds or less,
in the 60
No,
seconds
no,
or less.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Take your time, Ben.
Because that is huge, and I think the start point has got to be at least a checklist of that makes you go through, well, what are we using this technology for? What are the ethical connotations of doing so, and how does that impact both our employees and our customers? And there's because the ethics can come into play in both of those arenas in particular. And one of the things that I've certainly been encouraging a lot of business owners to do is, if you're using AI technology, it's my humble belief you should just be transparent about it, because I believe that customers are already thinking it. They're already saying, well, are you using AI or not? And I think if you try and hide that, or don't be very transparent about it, I think that lack of transparency is going to harm a brand very, very quickly. So I think the first step is really, making sure that you've got a checklist for every project so at least it's considered. Like, so whether it's ethics, so it's gray. It's always going to be gray. We're always going to make slightly good decisions and slightly bad decisions. There's never a checklist that's going to work explicitly for this, but at least putting that in place will allow every project to go through the gates to go, have we considered it? And then the other thing is transparency of how it's being used in every context, whether that's internally and using our employees' kind of data, and or externally and using it to either with our customers' data or to serve our customers. And I think that transparency of that use is actually going to set businesses apart, because pretty soon, I mean, I know it will be a discriminative. I mean, are you using AI? Because I want you to be efficient, and I believe that the technology is going to allow you to be more efficient. So that's actually going to set you aside, I think, from your competition by being transparent about using it, and shows that you're being kind of forward thinking around that. And clearly, there's a lot more depth to go into with that, and I would recommend kind of deep diving. There are some organizations that are already set up that can provide specifically that. So if a business leader thinks that this may have some really challenging ethical considerations, there are AI ethics companies out there who will provide you with very targeted consultancy to say, well, we'll dig into it and we'll help you navigate that whole arena, which I think that's super valuable. And I'm glad that, because as you say, it's one of those kind of gray areas. So who knows at the end of the day.
I really liked your answer about transparency and disclosure there. I think since we are still in the nascent stages of deployment and understanding what this technology is and can do, and because it's evolving so rapidly, so quickly, I really like that idea of being very open and candid about where we're using AI and where we're not, especially from a customer or a client stakeholder-focused perspective. I think that makes an awful lot of sense. So thank you. We covered an awful lot of ground, and it's easy when I get to the conclusion of a conversation like this to understand why folks like Lex Friedman have 3-hour podcasts, because this discussion, as with most, I could keep going for another hour or two, but we do try to land the plane in 45, 50 minutes or less. So with that in mind, Is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience today? Is there one piece of advice that you'd like to give leaders and executives looking to leverage AI in their organizations? Is there a question I didn't ask you that you wish I had, that you are just burning and dying to answer? What is one parting thought here, Ben?
I think the parting thought that springs to mind the most, Chad, is to get started. I mean, the best time to get started with AI was yesterday, and the second best time is today. And again, I've paraphrased something that's a well-known kind of phrase, but I wholeheartedly believe it. There's the just go out and experiment. That's the first thing if you haven't. And I've witnessed leaders on both ends of the spectrum. I can see there are already business leaders out there who are figuring this out, trying to embrace it. And there's plenty of folks on the other end of the spectrum. And I think those people that I speak to first, which is to say, just go and try it. Like it doesn't have to be, you don't have to decide you're going to integrate it into your business today, but trying it and experimenting with it will help you understand it better. And again, maybe start to stimulate some of that thinking and overcome that fear. So that would be the kind of key piece of advice I would give them. Just get started.
Sage advice, as always. Thank you, Ben. For our listeners that want to learn more about your work or get in touch with Freya Systems, what's the best way for them to do that?
The best way to do that is to find me on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. You can find me at Ben-Johnson-at-Freya on LinkedIn.
That's a lot of dashes.
That is a lot of dashes. I was trying to make it. There's more than one Ben Johnson. It's one of those common names that I crop up in lots of places. Let's put it that way. Or reach out via our website, which is www.freyasystems.com, and be happy to have a conversation with you. So those are generally the best places to find me. And yeah, I'd be excited to have a conversation with AI with everyone. So.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. This was fantastic, and I really enjoyed our time together.
Okay, I did too. Thank you very much for inviting me.
You bet. For our listeners, thank you once again for tuning into AI for the C-Suite, where we're committed to helping middle market leaders thrive during the exponential age. If you found value in today's discussion, be sure to subscribe to our podcast, follow us on all the socials, and visit our site, aiforthec-suite.com. Join us next time as we continue to unlock the potential of AI for your organization. And until then, keep your algorithms running, your leadership evolving, and your AI in check. Take care, everybody.